Fat Boys, kind of a wild week, not like the offensive juggernaut of week 2 or the just complete red zone that was week 1. But speaking of red zone, if you watched it, there wasn't always teams in it because they kept getting their field goals blocked and running in the opposite direction. Defenses ran wild. Points to be had in that side of the ball. And then obviously a few huge performances, including the fact that our wide receiver 1 is still not on anyone's team. But we'll get to that. NFL first, then our scores. I'm not sure if the Goldilocks reference works, but realistically, if week 1 was a little light on the offense and week 2 is a return to form, I guess week 3 was kind of in the middle, and certainly they kind of came sporadically. Randomly enough, I think you're going to see a lot of people's high scores were defense and kickers because apparently blocking field goals is super easy. On a really, really weird note, I had a trippy. Most of you know I'm in Thailand, and so I don't usually get to watch the early games, and I do kind of tune in for the later ones as I wake up. I couldn't sleep, so I was up at about 2 o'clock or 1:30, I think. I caught the second half or even parts of the first half of the early games. And most of them weren't great. And so I kind of like rolled back to bed and thought, well, some fantasy updates. And then as I'm like kind of half sleeping, all I'm hearing is more noise, which usually means stuff's going on. And it was. A lot of the games got super close. We had 4 games come down to a game-winning field goal. And weirdly enough, also 4 block kicks. And I distinctly remember in my dreamy state being like, it is kind of hard to block when you're kicking, isn't it? And then almost on cue. At least that's how I remember it happened. It probably wasn't. Anyway, aside from that, we also had our first few kind of run of injuries. I know we had a couple. We did have a running back out last week and a bunch of quarterbacks. But now we're getting a few more either season ending in Najee. I think that's pretty much confirmed. And Connor, definitely, if you watched it. Then you get the ones, the beloved high ankle of CeeDee Lamb. And I know they say sprain on it, but just like I said last week, there's some things that we know enough to read between the lines. It is not an ankle sprain when it's high ankle. Hopefully for those people who have them, we have the best. But waiver wires are going to heat up a little bit because of it. We're also looking at trends and patterns shifting. We still have some 3-0 and some 0-3 teams, but there were 3 teams, Saints, Panthers, and Chiefs, that walked into week 3 having not have 1 second of the lead. 2 of those 3 won, so now it's just the Saints, not surprisingly. Indy punted for the first time, so Indiana Daniel Jones, I'm not fully leaning into that nickname, not as much as like Drake, maybe, because that one's funnier. But they did finally punt. The punter earned his paycheck after 2 weeks, and it was only just the once, but still, the Colts are a little on fire. So I guess the biggest thing heading into week 4 is this enough data for you to be convinced? Is Daniel Jones going to be a top 5 fantasy quarterback, or are things about to come back down to earth? And I guess your variance on that kind of depends on who's on your bench, but that's enough for NFL. Let's get to our scores. Bit of a power play here by Whalen. Our number 1 team also was our number 1 scoring in week 3, really just spiking the ball on us. And unfortunately on poor Chaz, who remains over on the other end. Now, Chaz had some bright lights. Mainly his boy, Caleb, was the quarterback 1. You heard it here first. Unfortunately, most of his other big guns didn't do quite the same. Rome Odunze did not have the massive game that he had the week before. Still did fine, though, and over average, but I think he wanted a little bit more from his RBs and certainly a little bit of life from some of his other skill positions like Harrison or kind of kicker defense situation. Whereas Whalen did... It's not like he went off in every single category, and certainly some of his big guns underperformed, but one of those big guns was not Jonathan Taylor. Running back 1, defense 1, so when he hit big. That's all he really needed to do, but 145 is going to win you pretty much every week, whereas 105... This week actually might have punched somebody, but unfortunately, Chaz, you just can't catch the right week at the right time. See if you can bounce back in week 4. Well, and that's 3-0, and I believe you're pretty much our top scorer here, so if not, it's going to be real close, so congratulations, pal. We assumed these two would have a good matchup, and they did for a bit there, and then they didn't near the end. Now, on Jake's defense, Josh Allen was the quarterback 5. He also had the running back 3, if we go all the way down to his flex. Unfortunately for him, his actual running backs didn't do a whole lot. In fact, that's going to kill you in most cases. A 102 is not even close to where he normally would like to be. Even looking at his bench, he didn't really have anybody in particular go off, so it's not like he made any bad decisions. On the flip to that coin, Ben is hitching to Swift, and now he's 2-1, number 3 overall. Gibbs was the running back 4, whereas Monty, his counterpart, was running back 2, but I think we'll get to him later. But he was kind of his big gun, and then just had steady performances throughout, getting plus 15 or close to in most positions, except for the one that actually is hitching to Swift. Seattle as well was the defense 3 on the week. One of those random ones that did punch a few holes here. So most good calls. I think that's fine. 135 once again. You're going to win most weeks with that one. These are 2 teams in our top 4 still, though, so let's not cry for them too much. I fully expect both of them to bounce back and have great weeks for us. Another not so barn burner, Horse took it to former coaching partner B, and pretty hefty, I might add. This was a rough go. Now, on Horse side, he did have Lamar, who was the quarterback 4. He had the wide receiver 4 in Nico, and he had the running back 2 in Monty, as I mentioned in the last one. Not a whole lot after that, but don't need a whole lot after that. His bench was fine, had some people that could have put up points, whereas on B side, he is a little upset because I'm pretty sure his only top 5 was his wide receiver 3, and that is in Brown, who was on the bench. Can't blame you, though, buddy. I mean, it's not like he's been lighting the league on fire, but you certainly could have used him maybe instead of Zay Flowers. Don't think it would have necessarily turned the tides, but would have given you a bit more respect. I don't know if there's a tennis reference. I don't want to say this is something to love because you scored some points, but you didn't even get it to the big old deuce, buddy. He just took it from you straight out. I don't know my tennis enough to make this kind of reference. Congratulations, Horace. Well done, buddy. Straight sets. That's what I should have said. Well, if I could turn back time. Anyway, in this particular case, I do not want to turn back time because V had not suffered a loss until last week, which I was pretty happy with because I had not suffered a win. Well, I don't know. We're going to move on. Hurts was the quarterback, too, and kind of his gem. And if you watch that game, that happened all at the end. Like, the first half, it looked like Hurts was going to be nothing, and then he was definitely more than nothing. Unfortunately, the rest of your guys not really doing too much. Now, you'll notice I'm not talking a whole lot about the kickers we actually picked. That's because the top 6 kickers this week, nobody had. Our highest scoring kicker was the kicker 7, and that's in Butt Kiss here. So Will, I guess that is a perk. On my side, one of my best choices was on my bench, unfortunately. That is the running back 5, so want to me. And you'd think with a defense that scored 15, I made the wrong call. Sure didn't. Indy got 17, so shove it. Sutton was the wide receiver 2, so he had a bounce back week, which I needed because some of my other guys just airball. We'll see how that kind of bounces me back, or how I can bounce back, to make sure that, because, you would think after a win, and I've said bounce back now twice when it's not appropriate, but in this particular case, I'm going to argue that it is, because 109 is not going to beat most people, but it's just going to beat the 94 that Will put up. I do expect him to bounce back because some of those guys on the rosters I think are going to have a big week for. So good luck there, buddy. I said 109 doesn't win you most matchups, but 105 sure as shoot doesn't either. But for our number 2 in the league, still undefeated, Underhill, it was all you really needed. And looking at your lineup, yeah, that's nobody. That's a 0 in the top 5. But Cook was just outside of it. Denver's defense, that's nothing to sneeze at. And you pretty much made the right calls, except for the fact that you could have put the tight end 4 in, Jake the Snake Ferguson. Come on, how can you do that? Over a Brown, too. Ugh. Disgusting. Anywho, for Rothwell, we can't really blame you. You had an okay week. Smith and Jigba's looking to be a great pick. Defensively, Pittsburgh scoring some points for you helps. Yes, you left Drake May on the bench. How dare you? But realistically, it's the CeeDee Lamb injury, the high ankle sprain, heard round at least your house, I'm assuming. We don't know what he's doing for next week. It's not looking super likely he straps him up. The high ankle sprain is a deadly one, so I'm sure you're keeping an eye on that. Underhill, I can't even make fun of you because you did technically go over your predicted. It's just your predicted kind of sucked. But what the hell am I talking about? You're 3-0. You make the rules. For the first time in the year, and certainly not the last, I'm going to go down and go, ooh, aren't we so close? But yeah, we pretty much are, but this is how you expect. We still have 2 winless and 2 lossless teams. So just bear that in mind as we get to our matchups, as I get to here. Anything of note, we have a 1 versus 10. That's always a fun upset. So I think everyone's cheering for Mark to help balance things out. We got a couple 2-1s up against each other. And like I said, the 2 3-0s remaining will certainly have targets on their back. Ben looking to take down. See, I was going to say John because his picture's on the actual logo, but that's how you know it's Underhill. Anywho, week 4 is going to be a wild one. Let's see why. I said week 4 is a wild one, but it's not necessarily wild as much as it is Irish. Dublin games are early, so do check them out, folks, because you got to make sure. I know some of us are awake, not awake. Some of us, that's a perfect time. Europeans, congratulations, you get an awesomely timed game. For us on this side, though, it's actually a game before you fall asleep, so I guess that's kind of fun. Anyway, I don't know how everyone feels about the international games, but at least it throws a little spice in. Just make sure you get your lineups in slightly early. Other than that, best of luck in week 4, everyone.